to Light in the Darkness. When you feel overwhelmed, what is it that you turn to? That's one of the questions that we're going to be exploring today as we explore unhealthy habits. My name is Hopkins. I'm a minister at the Oliver Creek Church of Christ. And in the series, Light in the Darkness, we're exploring how we can bring just little shades of light into the darkness of the coronavirus pandemic, of quarantine, of social distancing, and of all the pressures and complications that are so strange and unique to this moment. Really what we're exploring are common issues that are ramped up because of the time that we find ourselves in. Today, unhealthy habits. A habit is something that you do without thinking. It's second nature. It's just what you fall into. It's your rhythm. It's a habit. And I think all of us have unhealthy habits. In other words, things that we do without thinking that if we were thinking, we wouldn't be doing them. They're things that we wish we could stop, but then without thinking, we just fall into them. But here's how many habits form. They form almost as coping mechanisms for other pressures and problems in our lives. And so at very young ages, many of us learn these habits, and these habits are how we get through the day, how we get through a week or a month. They make us feel better temporarily, and sometimes looking back, we wish we weren't doing them. That's the focus of this time today. Each week in Light in the Darkness, I bring on some special guests from our amazing congregation, Oliver Creek Church of Christ. And many of these people are part of a special team like today called the Recovery Coalition. These are people who are recovery-minded. And I'm going to introduce you to two special people in just a minute who fit this bill. Some of my favorite Oliver Creek members who can really help us explore practices for bringing light into the darkness of our unhealthy habits. But before we get to the practices, I want to kind of set the tension. What is it that you do, that you turn to when you feel overwhelmed? What's the coping mechanism that you've adopted, maybe even from early on? What's the thing that you do that you wish you could stop doing? That when the pressure's on, you're afraid you're going to go back to? There's so many answers to this. It takes a variety of forms, all the way from substance abuse to relationship problems to pornography or to eating habits and drinking. There's just so many varieties of our unhealthy habits. This session is not about anyone in particular, but it's about those extra pressures that are facing us right now because of where we are. So what are some of those extra pressures that are facing us because of a pandemic, because of quarantine and being in our homes more and away from folks more? Well, here's the surprising thing, that almost no matter what your trigger is or your cue is inside your heart and your mind and your body for an unhealthy habit, it's ramped up right now. Just think of some of these triggers for just common cues that make us turn to unhealthy things or in unhealthy degrees. Isolation, boredom, when you're spending more time in anxiety and stress, fear. These are the most common triggers, and these are some of the most common emotional experiences that people are facing right now. And I think this just means that right now some of the most common triggers are amped up. And here's another way to think about it. It's not just that our triggers are amped up. It's that our structures are shaking and changed. Here's what I mean. A couple of years ago, Kelsey and I had bought a foreclosure house, and we walked in, we were going to do a remodel. And Kelsey did what I've learned since then, does in every house that we walk into. She chooses walls to knock out. And of course, after she says, this wall needs to go, we got to open up this room. We go up into the attic and we take a look and we say, oh no, this wall, the structure is load bearing. And so what do you do when you want to remove a load bearing wall? Well, you can remove a lot of things, but then you kind of get down to the studs. And before you knock out those final studs of structure, you've got to replace them with a temporary structure. I think that's exactly what we need right now in a pandemic to help us in our unhealthy habits. In order to see real transformation, you need a temporary structure, because this event has just knocked all the structure out of our rhythms and our routines. And it's time, I think, to intentionally build in some structure. So what would this look like if you wanted to do this? What would it look like to build a temporary wall just to hold up until you can get back to your old rhythm, to your normal rhythm? It's going to look like relationships. It's going to look like people who can speak truth into your lives and accountability. It's going to look like some other kind of basic Christian disciplines and practices. Actually, it's going to look like a lot of things. And so two of my favorite Oliver Creek members, Jason and Rose Heckendorff, are going to join me in just a minute. I'm so excited to introduce you to them. But what they're going to help us do is to recognize and then replace. Because you have to replace it with something, temporarily at best, with structure. And so all the things that we were doing to get through the week in a healthy way, to get through the day in a healthy way, we need some temporary buildings to get us there. Maybe it's new rhythms and routines. To help us do this, let's meet Jason and Rose. Well, hello, Jason and Rose Heckendorff.
Hello.
Jason and Rose are two of my favorite people at Oliver Creek Church of Christ. They've been there about the same time as I have. They came in a few months after me, and they've worked with our recovery ministry for just going on 3 years in various ways. And now Jason and Rose are actually leading our weekly growth group that's called New Direction. Welcome to Light in the Darkness. Jason, I'd love to hear a little more about your story and how you ended up in recovery ministry and where you are today. And Rose, feel free to chime in whenever you want as well.
I'll do my best to sum this up. I came to Memphis with a mission of ending my own life to give my wife and children a path of peace in the direction that Rose wanted them, with the Christian church that she always wanted for them. Upon arriving here, my life changed dramatically. A big part of Oliver Creek, but in part of meeting one of the elders at our church, that for some reason a connection was there, and I give a lot of responsibility to for personally saving my life. That and the Ulriches, just in embracing me the way that they have. I came with a background of drugs and alcohol, rage and anger, lived in fear and anxiety for many, many years.
Rose, what was that like?
Isolating, scary. Never really knew what each moment was going to bring, let alone day to day. But I think that's one of the reasons that I appreciate Oliver Creek and the ministry so much, is just being able to speak to other people as they walk through being with somebody who's going through some kind of destructive behavior or struggle. I feel like it's great to be able to talk a little bit. Obviously, it helps me heal as well, but it's just great to be able to walk with them through those things.
Yeah, but now at Oliver Creek, y'all are like keystones. So what's changed in the time between then and now?
I'd say one of the biggest things is that when I asked what I could do to repay the favors back that were given to me and the blessings that I felt, I was told to first off praise God. And at that time, I was like, "You're out of your mind." I didn't even know what that truly meant in my heart. I knew what it meant in words. But it's the ability now to be able to share our story in a perspective that you can't tell somebody what to do, but you can show them some real life instances that have happened, and we've come through it.
Yeah. Rose, you used the words isolating and scary. Um, what are some words you'd use to describe kind of life now?
Uh, it's just honestly fantastic. I mean, having a background where God was the center was what I always wanted for my family and our relationship, and it's just been completely transforming actually having that as opposed to the life that we were living before.
Yeah, what a path y'all have been on. But it really is amazing to see the transformation that God is working in both of your lives and in your marriage, and now through you to bless other people. Can you tell me about your roles with New Direction?
Yeah, I'd say we both play very equal roles. I may be the one that is the sounding voice overall, but Rose is truly the heart of what we do. Um, by bringing the ladies together, it has made New Direction 2 to 3 times larger than what it formerly was for over 2 years. And we have a core group of 6 to 8 people, and it's due to being able to work with our coalition and then just having the presence of Rose there each and every week in her dedication.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's something pretty special about that time when we break up into groups of men and women separately and get to share.
Yep.
That's pretty key, I think, to what we do.
So in this session of Light in the Darkness, we're talking about unhealthy habits. These habits that, I mean, habits are things that we fall into without thinking about them. But the unhealthy ones that we're focusing on are the ones that we fall into that we wish we wouldn't fall into, that we want to stop, but without thinking, we keep doing it. And it sounds like, and I know your story some, it sounds like y'all kind of know that road. And it sounds like you're walking with men and women who are at all points on that road. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
And so I'd love to hear your perspectives on some habits or structures that you can build into our lives when it seems like everything is kind of being shaken. Earlier in the stream, you don't know this yet, but earlier in the stream, I shared a story of a home renovation where we knocked out a supporting wall. And before you knock out the wall, you have to build a support wall, a temporary one. And I think that the coronavirus pandemic and the quarantine and distancing and the stay-at-home orders have basically done that to our habits and to our rhythms and routines. They've just knocked out all the structure. And so, can you help us kind of think through what are some temporary structures during these strange times that we can put into place? There's a few I want to ask you in particular about. Can you all just talk about the importance of relationships in maintaining healthy habits versus unhealthy ones?
Something that was always hard for me for years and still sometimes is just talking with your spouse. Over the last several months here, Rose and I have talked more in the last few months than we have in 15 years of our marriage. And that was a big move and still a big part of my efforts and struggle that I have to deal with. But that alone, just talking things out is
Yep.
very, very key. Letting each other know how you feel.
So to have some sounding board, some listening ear, it sounds like that is critical, especially in times of uncertainty. Rose, what's the place of connection for you?
I was just specifically thinking about a thing that was pivotal for us is just learning when and how to speak to each other too, giving grace in a moment of weakness maybe, but and learning to talk through things later when emotions aren't high. I think that's pretty key.
So when it comes to overcoming unhealthy habits, what's like a best practice right now for reaching out and staying connected to folks? Obviously, we can't even touch most folks. We can't be in the same room with a lot of people. Are there ways to still stay connected? What would that look like?
There are, and it's been happening all around us. But just a simple drive by and a honk of your horn outside somebody's door, or we've had 2 people just stop by today, and we've talked to them from the garage or from a window.
Yep. I think I got that same visitor.
A simple text And one thing that I'll tell people is, yes, texts are great, but picking up the phone and calling somebody is powerful. You
Yep.
can hear their tone. You can hear what's going on with them, what's going on around them. And I think that's key as well.
Yep. I I think that even like a rhythm of calling a particular person or a small group of people, if you're recognizing your, I don't know, frailty, your temptation, your struggle right now, that it's amping up, now is the time to get on the phone and to call someone. The other thing I think that you can do is to give people permission to speak into your life. Have you ever done that for someone where you said, if you notice something, please come and talk to me about it? And
Oh,
Rose, what's it like once you give permission? Are they more likely to kind of engage you? How does that change the relationship?
yeah, I would say absolutely. It's just there's a lot of trust there that trusting somebody enough to allow them to speak freely, and it goes both ways too. But I think there's nothing like honesty when you finally get to that point in a relationship where people can speak freely and you listen with an open heart and open mind.
Yep. Um, I'd love to hear the power of "I love you," um, especially when navigating failure and struggle. Um, have you all had that experience where someone told you, even knowing that you struggled with something, or had even failed recently with something, where they still told you they loved you? What?
Yeah.
How does that statement kind of bond a relationship and help overcome?
I'll use an experience just this last week. Um, Rose and I have sent multiple messages to each other, but also to our daughters, just telling them in the morning, that we love them. Stay sweet. That's Rose's words are be sweet, be sweet. Every morning before I leave, now I go and I kind of wake the girls up, and I do that as well. Just tell them that I love them and tell them to be sweet. Um, those words are very powerful. Um, just reaching out to somebody, I reached out to a fellow brother that I know has been having some struggles and has voiced them to me, and just put at the end of it, that I love him. And uh, those words mean a lot. And some people find them as weird when you're saying that to another man or to another woman, but love is not a physical thing. Love is an emotion from your heart.
Hmm. What do you think, Russ?
Uh, he mentioned our girls. I was just thinking, the kids are all struggling with different emotions and stuff right now too. But
Yeah.
not just saying I love you, but I think whenever we're dealing with stuff, man, the people that you're allowed to touch right now, the hugging, just holding tight, because something about a tight hug and your barriers all get let down. And
Yeah, and it's almost like that becomes more important right now. So if physical contact is one of those love languages, like I think it's Chapman says it is, then we may not even recognize that we've just stopped speaking in that language right now, except for the small group of people who happen to share your home. So it sounds like you're saying you would really encourage people to embrace physically with the people that you can, and sometimes it may even be to compensate for some of the people who you can embrace.
oh yeah, I think it's huge, and I don't even think we realize how much we're missing it until you go hug one of your children, and wow,
Yeah,
it's very powerful.
yeah. Um, Today I had to ask my wife for a hug because it was weird when you get visitors and you don't even shake their hand or you don't give them a hug or touch them. It's a strange time. So I think relationships are one of the main tools that we have for overcoming unhealthy habits. If you can include people kind of in the circle of knowledge, it becomes really valuable. But relationships also become really tense when there's someone with unhealthy habits. Jason, you snickered at that. Rose, I'm curious, what's it like to be in a relationship with someone where you're worried about their stress level and how they're going to cope and what they're going to do? So I guess I'm asking, like, put yourself in the shoes of someone who may be watching or listening today, who they themselves are doing okay right now, but they really love somebody who's struggling. Can you kind of name some of what that experience is like and what they may be feeling?
I just think there's a lot of, I guess anxiety is probably the right word around it. When you're loving somebody in that position, you don't know how they're gonna cope with the next thing, or if they have a destructive habit, how far they're gonna go to try to make the current pain go away, or the emotions that they're feeling. I just think there's a lot of stress, and most situations that we know of or our own. I think that you keep that to yourself so much, and that's probably the biggest thing, is just that you feel like you can't talk about it. There's some sense of shame, I guess, in a relationship that shouldn't be there. And I think that for me, the biggest thing is just being able to open up a little bit and talk about it. Like I said before, work through it with other people. It's amazing how powerful it can be just to be able to speak about something that you're holding inside.
Yeah. You named shame as one of those key things that's happening. You said it shouldn't be there, but the reality is that's just, it's an automatic response that comes into our heads, even when we're not even a part of the unhealthy thing. It's so affecting. What kind of help in relationships, you just touched on it. It's one thing for someone with an unhealthy habit to go pursue relationships and strength and accountability in their friends. But on the other side of it, what kind of relationships are you needing?
I think, honestly, a big part of it is just, I don't know if the right word's validation. Just the things you're feeling, the things you're going through are real. Again, so much of it is just that knowing that you're not alone. There are other people that you probably have no idea that have gone through it, but really are willing to speak their story, tell their story, and ways that they were able to cope with it. There are a lot of components to it. It's, the person with the destructive behavior, and then, maybe it's a spouse or a child or a parent, whomever, but there are a lot of people who are affected by those with the behaviors.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's almost like you're concerned about how they're going to be triggered by this situation, and that is your trigger for more anxiety. So it
Yeah.
just becomes a cycle. I think another tool in addition to relationships is just, I've heard it called externalizing it, where you just get it outside of yourself instead of just thinking and ruminating and worrying all the time. To speak it, to write it. Jason, how have you seen that habit kind of pay off? Getting it out of your head and onto someone else or onto paper or something like that.
I religiously, and have for 3 years, every single morning I journal. I have a way of journaling that I don't have to have it on paper, that kids can find it. I have a way of putting it out there to just me and God. And I can always start my day out the right way with God, just me and him journaling together. Sometimes I'm talking quietly to myself about it as I'm journaling it, but that is powerful. But scripture, one of the scriptures I read every day is Philippians 4, and I always start in Philippians 4:4. Always be joyful of the Lord. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. Remember, the Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And that's a scripture for me that's, if I didn't read that every day, I don't know where I would be. It's very, very powerful to me.
Yes. It's interesting. Even the next verse, you keep going. That's where he says, you should think about these things rather than those things. And so he's just saying, like, get things into you and get those things and genuinely reflect and think on them. So journaling, 25-year-old Jason, what would he think about a grown man journaling every morning?
You're a wussy. Who needs that? Be a man. Deal with it. work through it. There's other ways of doing it.
Just muscle through it, right? Just power through it. You don't need that.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
No, it is not correct. The more you stuff it in, eventually you're going to become the time bomb, which I did for years, and you're going to explode. And if you don't explode, you're going to start to break down everything around you, which inevitably is going to fall down on you.
Yeah, that's well said. Rose, can you also speak to the power of externalizing, maybe in the form of confession to a person or to a small group? You've been around New Direction for some time, and I'm sure you've heard plenty. And I'm not asking for details, of course, but I'm just asking, are you seeing power in getting those thoughts and words outside of you?
Oh, absolutely. I think for all of us too, the comfort level, it doesn't take long to be comfortable, especially like he said, we have a core group. I think we all come to rely on each other, not just in group, but I mean, for those daily, hey, I need somebody to pray for me today, and I'm going to be honest and say that. And I'm sending a text message to, a handful of ladies, and I get the same thing back. It's like, there's nothing like being able to be honest and just say what you have going on. Super powerful.
Yes. Last week we were talking about anxiety, and I was interviewing Landon. One of the things we talked about was name it to tame it. And it's that if you can identify something, now you're in the driver's seat for what to do with it. And when you're unable to name it, then it's just driving you, and you're just completely unaware of it. You're both nodding, so it seems like that's been true in your experience.
Oh yes. A lot of times you don't know because you're not thinking about it, you don't know what you're anxious about. And so you need to sit back and figure out, what is this fear? Where is it coming from? Why is it there? And why is it affecting me in the way that it is?
Yeah. And so in particular, when it comes to unhealthy habits, these things that we do without thinking, and we don't even want to do them. So I think it's so important to name what those temptations are out loud or on paper to a trusted friend, maybe not to the whole world. That's appropriate to just save those for a small confidential group or a trusted group of friends, to name temptations. I was talking with our friend Luke Guard today, and he was mentioning how sometimes, let's say we have some unhealthy habit in our past, and sometimes we can become so proud of the progress that we've made that it's kind of like, he that thinks he stands, take heed lest he fall. And so he says one of the things you have to keep going back to is renaming. He says most of us are too proud to do that, and so we end up in relapse rather than in recovery from whatever our habit is. And so he says that this is actually a great gift, because there's such disruption right now that everything's being shaken, that it's like, oh yeah, I need to rename and reclarify what it is I'm struggling with, because the thing I'm struggling with may be the same, but it is in a new scenario. So what are some ways that you can name the temptations? Like, you mentioned journaling. We've talked about New Direction. You can talk about those in further detail, but are there other ways to name it, to tame it when it comes to the temptations and the unhealthy habits that we have?
It's prayer, just prayer with God.
Yep.
And sometimes you don't have anybody else around, and oftentimes. And so you need to be able to take it to him. That shame comes in. I think when Rose said that earlier, it kind of rings a bell that it's easy to blame God for a lot of problems. It's hard to take him your problems.
Yeah. So do you combine prayer and journaling?
Yes.
What does that look like?
I actually, in a lot of it, the first thing I do is pray. And then as I'm going through my journaling, I often write out a prayer. In fact, most of my Sunday morning prayers that I do when I go up in front of the congregation, I have written out most of it in detail.
Yep. Rose, what about you?
I think Jason's habits on, writing and stuff are better than mine in that regard. I have found, I don't know, I'm a little different I've said this before and it feels a little strange to say, but I feel like I have a kind of a constant dialogue going with God. Like we,
Yep.
and throughout the day, like I don't necessarily say a lot of really quote unquote formal prayers, but I'm constantly conversing. I mean, he doesn't talk back like in that way, but I just feel like I spend a lot of time seeking and praising, and I've done that for as long as I can remember. So I'm not journaling. I'm not real good in that regard, but.
So you say that sounds odd. I think that sounds wonderful.
Okay,
I'm so
good.
thankful that that's your prayer rhythm. Some of the most mature men and women that I know, it's like that's where they've gotten to, and I think that's a mark of maturity, not strangeness. And it's only strange because it's so unique. So I think that's a great discipline to just bring it all to God, pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
Um, but you also seem to be pretty good about staying clued in with your kind of core circle of friends. Um, have you named anything with them? Um, what's been the impact if you have, either one of you?
You can go first. Sorry.
Um, yes, in fact, I go to two different groups during the week. I have New Direction on Tuesdays and I have Celebrate Recovery on Thursdays. And I have found that confession in those groups is very, very important. Not only is it release for you and for a connection from you to God, but you mentioned something earlier that you said maybe you're not going to name it out to the whole world or put it out there it's easier to put it out there to a small group or somebody one-on-one. And I've gotten to a point now that no, I want to put it out there to the world because that person across the table that you didn't know, they just seemed as normal as could be because you made yourself vulnerable and humbled yourself
Yeah.
and put yourself out there to the world, which is extremely hard to do.
Yeah.
You might have just pricked them enough that they're gonna come and seek that help and that guidance. And I've had that happen on many occasions.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's such power in vulnerability. Rose, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I'll actually echo that. My favorite thing, I guess, about our story is I always, when we were going through stuff, I always said, I know there's a reason for this. Sometime I'm going to be able to help somebody, and I guess that actually, I mean, literally got me through, and it was so true, and it really has, and I think it's very powerful every time. Somebody shares something with us, and it's funny because I'm like, oh, I had no idea, and they would say the same thing about us until people are comfortable enough to share.
Yeah. I also think there's value in naming your triggers, not just your temptations. So your temptations are the unhealthy habits that you are trying to not fall into, but your triggers are the things and the cues that your body and your mind and your life get that make you go to those things. And during where we're at right now, there's so many. So boredom, isolation, anxiety, stress, change, like all of these are major catalysts and triggers that are just happening across the board to all of us. I think it would be a great exercise if people could name those triggers, especially when they're experiencing them. So then you become the one in the driver's seat rather than the unnamed thing. Luke, again, he shared with me the acronym that we've talked about a couple of times, HALT, HALT. Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? And if you can just put words on that, I think there's such power. What's the danger in triggers that go unnamed or unnoticed?
And unnoticed, I think, is more key. I think the triggers are known by the individual more often than not. They're just not identified, and when they go unnoticed, it's because they're getting pushed away. You've learned to mask them and
Yeah.
disguise them, and that can be a real danger. It brings me to Proverbs 4:23 that guard your hearts above all else, for it determines the course of your life. If we don't guard our hearts, those triggers are gonna get to us, and triggers change.
Yeah, you said we're almost masked to them. How do you get to where everybody knows that there's something that cues them into an unhealthy habit? But how do you get to where you're actually taking off the mask and looking in the mirror and naming that? What's that process look like?
Ooh, that's tough. The first off is
Those are for Rose.
what's that?
I said the tough ones are for Rose.
Acceptance that you are imperfect. Trust in God, and I think that's a big key one for me is the trust in God. That mask can come off if I have that trust and that faith.
I've seen whenever you take off your mask, somebody else is more likely to take off their mask. And you were just talking about the power of vulnerability and sharing your story. I've seen you share your story, and man, it opens hearts. And we could point to Oliver Creek members who have changed lives because of your influence and the influence of others who've taken off their mask first. I think that's absolutely one way to do it. Rose, what's on your mind? How do you get from I'm going to intentionally not look in the mirror right now to actually removing the mask and naming the triggers so that I can overcome them? Tag team?
Yeah.
I think that for her, if I'm speaking for her, it's her having the confidence that she can speak what's on her mind.
Oh, good one. That's true.
It's ironic given that you just didn't want to answer that.
Yeah, but I wasn't thinking of it, but I've said it to him many times. I feel like there were so many years when I had to just keep everything inside. Everything's fine, put a smile on your face and pretend that everything's, going fine. But now we talk about that. Like I can't, I need to be able to have an outlet. I need to be able to tell him what I'm thinking, to share with other people what's going on.
I think sometimes, right, we're afraid of the consequences and it's almost like if we start down that road of naming our own triggers, then I become the one responsible instead of the people I'm blaming, or instead of the situation that I'm blaming. But even naming that is a step towards recovery, I think. That if you can even name what's keeping you from naming things, that's in the right direction. I want to speak to the power of grace, though, in a church community that is okay with sinners being present. And I know that's not every church community, but I think one way that people will take off the mask and name their sin is if they understand that Jesus is gracious to sinners. What's it like to be a part of a church that, in some sense, champions transformation and embraces sinners and their stories?
It's awesome. It's family. It's family in a way that, man, you don't even know exists until you're part of it. It's humbling, and truly, it's awesome. You have a lot to say to that, but
for me, she said the word family. It's what I know as family right now. My relationship with my blood family isn't where I want it to be. Oliver Creek has accepted me for me, but not only just me. I've seen them accept people that are in much worse shape than me, and then I've also seen those that don't seem like they're in much worse shape because of their status or how they present themselves, but yet then we know that there's something inside there, and Oliver Creek has opened that up. But what they've done is they come to your level rather than try to talk to you from a different level. They may not be on the same level with you, but every single person there that comes forth to you, they treat you as if they were right there with you, and you don't see that anywhere that you go.
Yeah, you say they may not be on that level. I think we all are all are on that same level. Nobody has fully arrived. We all press on toward the goal. And we all share in the identity of Jesus Christ as a gift of grace, not of our own accomplishments or our own holiness. So if Paul can say, I'm the chief of sinners, then everybody at our church can too.
Well, but that right there is what's so unique, Smith, is you just saying that, so different from other places and people just always seeming like they're better, they would never go through anything like that in their family or in their home but it's not true. And that's what's so great is that our congregation is so open about real life.
Yeah. And honestly, those are my worst sins, is the sins of self-righteousness. It took me a while to realize that those sins were as heinous as any other sin. Well, I would like to talk about some avenues of recovery and overcoming unhealthy habits that Oliver Creek has in particular for our members. There's one, this may be news to you, but I'd like to break the news. Our church is going to make listening sessions available for any Oliver Creek member who wants them. These are going to be with mental health professionals. They're free. They're 30-minute blocks, not of therapy or counseling. You can, of course, we would encourage you to get that if that's what you're needing. But if you just need somebody to listen to you, to talk through something, those sessions are going to be available on Friday. Today is Friday, by the way. And if you're a member, it's coming in your email with links that you can sign up for that. You'll get an email back from Recovery Coalition at olivercreek.org, and then you'll kind of just follow the steps. But I think this is a great gift that could really bless some people. I've been reflecting a lot on the need and the craving that people have for listening, and we're trying to make that available because we know that isolation is just ramping up. But the other ministry I want to really highlight is one that y'all are really central to, and it's the New Direction group that meets each week. Can you describe what that group looks like and kind of the format, and maybe most importantly right now, how could someone attend right now, given that we're not having groups at our facility?
We're currently meeting on Zoom sessions every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, just as if we were in the church building. We're just finishing a series right now of I Can Only Imagine, a book written by Bart Millard. And it's been 28 weeks that we've gone through this, and everybody's been dedicated to go through it. And so now is a great time for somebody to get involved. We're going to grab topics for a few weeks, and then we have a new section, a new series that we're going to start that I'm going to be studying through with another individual called God's Not Dead. And it's a small group study. But what we get to the opportunity to do, and what we're going to start doing this week is, and Rose said it, we're going to break into men and women. We're going to have 2 separate sessions where the men and women can share for just a few weeks after this week. We found that that's been some of the most powerful means of connecting. To be able to get connected with us, that is another avenue that you can go down, that you can either contact the church. Also, my phone number's out all over the road, out in front of the church. But you can call me personally, and I will, if you are a gal, I will put you in touch with Rose. And if you're a gentleman, I will take heed and talk to you there myself. But what we're doing and what we're talking about is real life struggles. You don't have to be an alcoholic. You don't have to be a drug addict. You might be struggling with finances. You might be struggling with pornography. You might be struggling with fear, anger, anxiety, rage. It's just an opportunity that you can come and listen to others' perspectives, that you can share what's on your heart, as well as bring Jesus into it. We talk a whole lot about how it connects back to Jesus. Each one of the studies that we've done through the book of I Can Only Imagine tied back to Jesus each and every week, and I'm really looking forward to the next series.
Why don't we wrap it up with just a couple of more personal questions about that? So, why is the gospel of Jesus Christ good news to you?
Because it's our future. I mean, it's our hope. It's the knowing that there's more, and there's more forever. We don't have to be bound by our past, if you will, or what we've been through. There's so much more ahead.
Yeah, earlier, Rose, you talked about how God has redeemed even the hardest parts of your story, and He's turned those into good things too. And to think that He's going to do that with every single story is pretty incredible.
It's exciting.
Jason, what about you?
It's a sense of release. It's relief. For me, letting God come into my life, it has taken all of my excuses that I had and taken them away, because it replaces them with the truth and with love. And so long as I can accept that and I can get into that word and read it, you don't understand all of it, and you're not going to memorize all of it, but the pieces that you do, they're always there for you to go back to. He provides a home that never goes away, a safe place for you.
Yeah. You both used the word family earlier. It's amazing that no matter where you're coming from or what you've done or who your blood family is, that you get a family in Jesus Christ. There's just so many amazing things. And so I would encourage folks who are struggling with unhealthy habits to just see the reality of grace, that it's waiting for you, that the struggle against sin, there's the gift of the Holy Spirit, and the Spirit wants to produce His fruit in you, not of your own power, although working with you, He wants to produce really great things in your life. What would y'all say to somebody who's already relapsed, who's maybe watching today and is just thinking, oh, I've blown it. I was doing so good, and now look where I am.
Failure is an action. It's not a way of life. We are all going to fall. We're all going to stumble. Look at the positive side of it, that you get to start over again. And you have tools in your toolbox now that you didn't have before when you first started, before you relapsed. What we have to remember is those tools, they get rusty. We kind of forget where we put them in that toolbox, but they were there and we learned how to use them. And it's kind of like riding a bike. We just got to go back to it. And when we get back on the horse again, we're going to be able to use those tools to get to better ourselves. And that is a huge key to it, that relapse is not the end all. It can actually be a huge step to the next step of progress that you're going to make.
Yes.
And hopefully alleviate another relapse.
Yes. Rose?
I think that it's just the most important part of all that is grace. And I mean, being able to give it, being able to receive it.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, like he said, we're human. We make mistakes.
Yep. Keep coming back.
Yep.
What brings you life? I asked Landon these questions too. But
first thing that brings me to life is just knowing that I have God in my life. The thing that drives me from there is my wife. But that is what brings me life.
Rose?
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing that the relationships with God, with my family, with Jason and the girls, and the fruit that comes from that is just, it's just awesome.
Yeah. So you get a lot of energy from connecting to God together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When do you feel most loved?
I don't know that there's a most loved time. What I feel now differently than I've ever felt in my life is a more consistent love. So I think I feel most loved when I know that I'm loving in the way that I should.
Yeah, that's my answer too. That was good.
All right, last one. Who encourages your soul?
Well, Jesus, of course. It's the Gospels encourages my soul. It's just when I get into the Gospels, I get lost, and and I get excited, and I get like this rejuvenation of understanding of, wow, a lot of people were like this. Oh, wow, look at this guy who did all these things. And if you just follow that, it's exciting.
We've had some lunches after your exciting trails through the Gospels. Those are exciting for me too.
I agree with that, but also on the human level, our Christian relationships. You asked before about our close circle, and it's pretty big, actually. But I'm very energized by those relationships and the things that we do to help each other in marriage and parenting and everyday life. I mean, it's pretty awesome.
Well, and adding on to that real quick, when you talk about that church family, one thing that I have found is by learning to be transformed into Jesus's image, the relationship that I have with my personal family, though it's far away and it's had a lot of damage done in its time, by being that beacon of light that he's allowed me to be and taught me to be, that relationship strengthens each and every day, each and every moment, more than sometimes I realize, because that connection's still there. And that's important, and that's key. You can heal others by your own actions, just in who you are, by setting that example.
Guys, thank you so much for your vulnerability, for your wisdom. I love you guys so much. I'm so thankful to be able to minister with you at Oliver Creek. I'm really proud of the work that God is doing. He's to be glorified for the kind of the joy and life and peace that he's brought into your lives through Jesus. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you.